Okay, let's start with the first unit. Now, the aim of this unit is to introduce trainees to the background information on health and safety and the legislation involved. And at the end of this unit, you should be able to name 3 places where health and safety is covered by legislation, give the differences between an improvement and prohibition notice, state 5 legal responsibilities of an employer, and identify 4 legal responsibilities of an employee. Now, if you look at that first learning outcome, name 3 places where health and safety is covered by legislation. Have a think. Where do you think health and safety is covered by legislation? It might be worth pausing this presentation now and jotting down areas, places, where you think health and safety is covered by legislation. Okay, so I don't know if you wrote any places down, but health and safety is covered at all workplaces. And perhaps you might have cottoned on that when you were going through the different places you were actually writing down. You might have put down schools, factories, workplaces in general, shops, offices, you name it. Every workplace, whether it's self-employment, or whether it's paid employment, or whether it's anywhere in particular really, is covered by health and safety legislation. Now, the only place that's not covered by health and safety legislation is your own domestic premises. So you can break whatever rules you want to at your own home, but any other workplace is covered. So if you look at that first point again, name 3 places, you could probably name about 10,000 places, but they're all covered by health and safety legislation apart from your own home. Okay, another thing I want you to do is tell me, what do you think health and safety is? Again, what I'd like you to do is to pause the presentation and then write down what health and safety means to you, what it means to you in your workplace. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to complete that, then restart the presentation. Okay, well, the definition of health and safety is all measures necessary to control and reduce risk to the health and or safety of anyone who might be affected by the activities of people at work. Now, let's have a look at that definition in more detail. Health really is to do with freedom from illness. Safety is to do with freedom from injury. And that's what a workplace should ensure. That wherever you work, you should be able to go home at the end of a day's shift, or a day's working, and be free from any illness and free from any injury caused by an accident. So that's what health and safety in a nutshell is health, freedom from illness, safety, freedom from accidents, which could result in injuries. Now look at the other part of that definition. Health and or safety of anyone who might be affected with activity of people at work. So it's not just you, it will be anybody who impacts on you, on your day-to-day job. So it could be your colleagues, could be your workmates, could be your clients, your customers, members of the public, children if they're allowed in the workplace. So it's anybody who actually impacts on your day-to-day activities. They are affected by health and safety. And if you look at the benefits, reduces suffering, accidents and illness, prevents legal action, controls costs, preserves a good reputation. And the factors affecting health and safety: occupational, the type of job you do, the sort of things that you deal with. You're working with dangerous equipment, you're working with chemicals. The environmental factors, the sort of environment, the conditions you're working under during your working day. And lastly, the biggest cause of accidents in the workplace, the human factor. A little bit of work for you. Normally I call this group work and I'll split people up into different groups. But what I'd like you to do now is to, again, pause the presentation and write down what you think could be the consequences of poor and good health and safety standards at a place of work. So in other words, on one side of the paper, perhaps put a column poor, and on the other side put good. And think of all the negative connotations of poor health and safety. What could happen to a person, a worker? What could happen to the directors? What could happen to the owners? What could happen to the business? as a result of poor health and safety standards. Then on the positive side, what are the benefits, what are the things that can come out of good health and safety standards at a place of work? So as I say, pause this presentation for a couple of minutes and jot down your ideas. And the sort of things you should have got out of that. Let's have a look at the negative aspects first. We've got accidents, illness and stress. And we'll be looking at the stress in a bit more detail later on. Deaths, increased sick leave, loss of earnings and increased personal costs, bad publicity and a poor reputation, lower staff performance and morale, reduced company performance, high staff turnover, low staff morale, prosecution, fines and imprisonment, prohibition and closure, compensation claims, increased insurance costs, legal costs, loss of jobs, and lastly, cost the health service and society as a whole. Again, might have had a lot more on there, you might have had a lot less, but these are the sort of questions that might come up in the exam itself, albeit the questions will tend to look at the positive aspects, not at the negative aspects. So let's have a look at those positive aspects. First of all, we got reduction in sick leave, healthy, happy, motivated work teams, a good reputation for the company, increased performance and profitability, orderly working environment and procedures, confidence in health and safety standards, and increased job security. So again, you could turn all these into negatives by just putting things like increase in sick leave, unhealthy, unhappy, unmotivated work teams. So you can turn all these into negatives, but it's the positive aspects that you will find will be asked about in the main exam itself. Okay, let's have a look at this slide. What causes harm to workers? Now, we've got the top 3 causes of fatalities. Number 1 is fall from height. Number 2, struck by a moving vehicle. Number 3, struck by a moving, including flying or falling object. Then we've got the top 3 causes of major injuries. Number 1, slips, trips and falls on the same level. Number 2, fall from a height. Number 3, injured while handling, lifting or carrying. And the top 3 causes of absences over 3 days. Number 1, injured while handling, lifting or carrying. Number 2, slips, trips and falls on the same level. Number 3, struck by moving, including flying or falling object. Now, there's a couple of things I'd like you to write down and remember from this slide. First of all, the biggest cause of fatality is fall from a height. Jot that one down. The biggest cause of injuries in the workplace is slips, trips and falls on the same level. Again, write that one down because it's very important. And the next thing I want you to write down, the biggest cause of absences, the biggest cause of time off from work is poor manual handling, which is what that says in number 1 there, injured while handling, lifting or carrying. That's poor manual handling. So out of that slide, you want to put down the top cause of fatalities is fall from height. The major cause of injuries is slips, trips and falls. And the biggest cause of time off from work is poor manual handling. Now, just to gain you an extra point in exam, some questions, or a question that's sometimes asked, is what's the biggest problem, or what's the biggest cause of accidents with people driving lorries? Now, you might come up with several answers of your own. Might be, I don't know, using a forklift truck when you're outside the lorry, or being knocked over by another vehicle whilst outside the lorry. But the biggest cause of accidents whilst working with lorries is actually falling from the cab. In other words, falling from a height. So again, that could give you an extra point in the exam itself.